Hi, this is Jason T. Ingram. I live in the Portland, Oregon area. I'm a multimedia artist, conversion therapy survivor. I'm proudly mentally disabled, and I am publicly closeted gay. Some might remember me better as Fake Zappa, which is a project I'm doing promoting myself as an independent artist. And I've been documenting a lot of different things here lately. The mental health care system in particular. And I'm also have a fascination with YouTube cult preachers. And so this is kind of an extension of a bigger project that I'm doing as well. And how many people watch these talking heads on YouTube? I don't get a lot of hits on these videos I do so far. I'm very long-winded. One of the symptoms of some of the mental health issues I deal with is rapid speech, so I decided to kind of take advantage of the fact that I'm very long-winded. And I have a background as an instructor, so I used to teach for, an hour or so at a time, and so I'm good at usually giving a lot, maybe too many details. And I also wanted to continue a series I'm doing about President Trump and how that relates to born again Bible believing Christians and what I call Bible culture. And Bible culture is very similar to the Quranic culture or the even folks that just serve the Old Testament. It is this empire on earth of people years ago learning how to deal with masses of people and how to get along and how to organize. And unfortunately, what usually happens is a centralization of power and giving way too much power to either one person or a small group of people. So today I'm going to talk about the Northwest Trump Alliance for Change and some of the Trump supporters here where I live in the Pacific Northwest. I also call this the buckle of the unchurched belt. And so it's interesting. The conservatives that are here are really, really intense because living in this culture in Oregon and Washington, and I even lived in Alaska for almost a decade, and there is a real big polarization here. We do have some moderates like me, although I do consider myself a liberal because, being gay and being disabled and being a weird, fucked up artist and open about smoking pot and a lot of my views and the fact that I supported Bernie and then I voted for Hillary and I was really involved in the Obama campaign and in the first one in '08. And so I also am really, really illiterate when it comes to U.S. government. In fact, I not only don't remember anything I learned in U.S. government in high school, I don't even know if I even took that class. I went to a school that it was really easy to flake out, and there was a lot of very smart people there, so they could get away with passing tests and flaking out on their classes, and I got away with a lot, and I managed to graduate, but I think they just wanted to get rid of me at my hippie school. Now, something I feel like that gives me an alternate perspective, which is basically what I do here, because I am really tired of hearing people talk about the same things over and over again. And I like to shoot out different ideas to people, whether they're conservative, liberal, or moderate, or whatever, especially folks overseas that are watching our system of governments and everything just slowly fall apart. And also, it's interesting. I love talking to Canadians about President Trump. And I love calling him President Trump, especially around a lot of people that I'm close to, because there are a lot of the people in my community are the folks that have those "not my president" signs, and if you mentioned President Trump, they'd be like, "Not my president, not my president." It was like you could just kind of push them, and they do that. So I'm still seeing this intense aversion in my community, and it's almost blinding them. It's almost like you just can't talk to these people because they have such a fear and a hatred and aversion towards our president. And I don't blame them because he's tearing down a lot of things that I hold dear. In fact, sometimes I even say everything that I hold dear. And it is also really weird to listen to those that are still supporting President Trump. And there's a lot of things going on that are so different in this presidency. And yet it's the same shit that we've seen for thousands of years, just in a different form. Now, I do want to talk about some good things about Trump getting elected. And I've thought about this, ever since election day. There are some reasons that I'm actually glad that he got elected. One is that, even though we had a Democrat in the White House for the last 2 terms, and yay liberals, and yay all of us progressives, and all of us gay people were able to kind of be a little more safe around communities and stuff like that. Some of us don't feel as safe as we could in a lot of places in the country. But for me, especially living in the Portland area, I could say that our former administration really favored our causes. And I think they favored our causes so much to where a lot of conservative people were very hurt. And we are seeing the result of that. And we are seeing a young generation of conservatives that are really different than anything we've ever seen before, too. And I will start with this. The Northwest Trump Alliance for Change started in March of this year, and they had a rally in Salem, Oregon, which is the capital of our wonderful divided state here. And if you know anything about Oregon, we had something that happened winter of last year where we had a bunch of white male landowners come to Oregon, and they actually took over some federal land with firearms and this stuff, and they didn't get punished nearly what you would think somebody taking over federal land with firearms. I mean, that's kind of a big deal. And yet, even though it made a little bit of national news, it just sort of like faded out. And then there was a time last year, towards the end of the year, where it came up in the news again. And then it's like, bye. So we saw folks in Oregon again with their firearms. And this was a pro-Trump rally. And they had one guy arrested because somebody yells out, "He's got a gun," And it's like, yeah, they're wearing red hats that say "Make America Great Again." When you buy one of those red hats, they come with a rifle or a pistol. Did you know that? I'm just kidding. I wouldn't be surprised, though, But as much as I love conservative, rural Americans, and I don't have much of a problem with gun culture compared to my friends and family, and especially my family, who have these extreme views about firearms and things like that. I've lived enough around country folk and know that that's a big part of their culture. So it doesn't freak me out that that they'll come to they'll do these rallies and they have firearms. But it is kind of weird, though, when you think about it, that, and this is where I'm going to go into YouTube cult preacher mode, because that was one of the things that I predicted in one of my videos I did the night before Inauguration Day. I did some videos about what to expect in the next year, maybe 4 years. And I haven't really changed a lot of my opinions. I think I really don't see him finishing 4 years in the White House. And I really wonder if that was even his goal, to finish 4 years in the White House, because he's got these goals that he's accomplishing that, from my perspective, are just unnecessary and ridiculous, and they don't serve the needs of people like me. And I really, really don't like them, lack of a better term. And we're always wondering what's his hidden agenda. And there's sometimes he does something and he reveals one of his hidden agendas that we didn't know before. But it's interesting how he really is so open about things that he stands for that really are harmful to most people unless you're very rich and very privileged. And so to think that President Trump is having some hidden agendas is kind of funny because, you know, typically when people have these kind of agendas, they hide them, and he's not hiding them. So it also makes me think, well, maybe he does have some agendas that he is hiding and things like that. And this group in Portland, I think, is really interesting. I mean, not Portland. I don't know where they're based in exactly. But what really interested me about the Northwest Trump Alliance for Change is that the founder is a young woman and the spokesman is an 18-year-old student. And I thought that he was very interesting too, because a lot of times we see Trump supporters as guys in Trump's generation. And if you are a high school kid growing up in a rural community or a Christian school or something where you're just really inundated with that type of ideology, and it's also very sanitized and separate as well, because Fox News and some of their sources and some of the channels that they go to, they really do a good job of not only, you know, spinning things and even the fake news and all this kind of stuff too. It's what they don't talk about a lot of times. And one of the issues that a lot of the folks on the left are really freaking out about is they just don't understand why Trump supporters are believing that global warming is some myth. And, you know, there's just such overwhelming evidence. And it's so obvious, and it's so obvious that we are contributing to the destruction of our planet. And it doesn't surprise me that people believe this, even young people. They can even go to a regular public high school and believe that global warming is a myth. And if you are in Bible culture, whether you are a born-again Christian or not, if you're in that world that is influenced by basically old traditional American ideas, and a lot of those were formed with the Bible, and people, they just use these expressions, you know, until the Lord tarries or things like that. And so they have that on their mind a lot, that this world is coming to an end, like very soon, like any second. And their priorities is about something totally different. And so that's the way a lot of these folks are wired. So that's why I'm not surprised that they really want to push this global warming is a myth kind of a thing. So I'd like to share some ideas, and some of them are kind of sensationalist. And some of these, I should probably warn you that some of this could end up being hype, and I'm a sucker for hype. And I'm a sucker for tacky bandanas. I got this one at the Dollar Tree last week, and I just loved it. It was in this section where they had a bunch of 4th of July decorations and stuff. So I got it home and washed it and realized this thing, it's I don't know what it's made out of. It's plastic of some kind. And then I tried to wear it, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't think any man in his right mind would ever wear this because it's so poofy. So, one of the things I like to think about when it comes to President Trump is the narcissist personality disorder. And personality disorders were something that a lot of people didn't talk about until this president got elected. And he has this personality that is warped, turned in on himself, and where everything is about him. And I know because I'm like a third generation of a couple of relatives that have those characteristics. And I'm also an entertainer. And also living with mental illness, it's so easy to get wrapped up in my own world. So one of the funny things about President Trump, I admit, is that I have a weird fucking kindred spirit with this guy. And I think it happened, well, it was a year and a half ago when I really started looking into his campaign that he was running. And I've never seen a campaign with these kind of supporters. And I've never seen supporters after the president has gotten elected doing rallies. And for lack of a better term, I say this is a president-setting event, a precedent-setting event. There's so many things going on in the White House that have never happened before in the history of our country. And if they have, they weren't publicized. And I believe that President Trump, when he talks, he's talking to two people. He's talking to his supporters, and he's talking to his non-supporters. And they're very divided, and it's obvious. And it would be so interesting to work in the White House and just have somebody come in there like a bull in a china shop and just like, fuck that, throw this out, throw this thing out and bring this in. And wow, that must be a trip, including the media. Oh yeah, we don't need the media here. We have nothing to hide. And how they're being so selective about what they share with the media and who they let in there and all this kind of stuff. And I think some of this could be the fact that he's doing a lot of things in order to demonstrate stuff to his non-supporters, which is me. I am a non-supporter. And a lot of the stuff that he says in his speeches and his tweets are scaring one group of people and building confidence from another. And it's like he goes bang, 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 bang. And I've seen this because I've been in relationships with narcissists. I had a partner who was in many ways quite the extreme narcissist personality disorder, able to turn off his guilt and whatever suited his needs and whatever he could get away with, he would do it. And it was terrifying when I realized this because he met a lot of my needs and he made me really happy at times and he was very gifted in a lot of ways. And so these people, they are a symptom of when somebody is desperate, they will go towards a narcissist. I've done this in my own life before. I've done this with jobs. Like I had a job that was offered to me, and I knew the guy was a compulsive liar and flaky, and I knew that he was known to say one thing and do another. But what he gave me was everything that I was wanting at the time: acceptance and having a pretty good paying job for a while and doing what I love to do. And when I challenged him about some of the ways he was treating people, that's when I started realizing really what I was coming up against. And one of the things that narcissists can do when they fight, one thing is that, the term hitting below the belt. And somebody hits here and here and here, and suddenly when they say, you know what, I'm going to really win this fight no matter what, and they start hitting below the belt, right in the crotch or whatever, really, really doing damage and breaking the rules. And if they can get away with it, they'll just keep doing that. And there is a way that their brains are wired in order to allow them to do this kind of stuff. And that's a whole nother talk in itself too, because I've experienced both sides of this as well. And I noticed that talking and trying to argue and trying to reason and compromise with somebody who's got this sociopathic behavior, if they're successful people and if they're in power, then the methods that they use in order to resolve a conflict or anything like that are different than most people. And I've noticed that it's like you talk to one of these guys, and instead of coming to a compromise, basically, I'm dealing with somebody who's got one agenda and it's theirs, and they're going to make sure they get it. And if they don't get it, then they're going to keep going lower and lower and lower until they hurt me, till they devastate me, till they ruin my life, till they steal everything. They'll do whatever they can to make themselves look good if they can get away with it. And these people get away with it. And in fact, there's a couple people that still get away with this stuff. And there are some people I know that still serve and follow and love and respect these kinds of people. So I'm not surprised that President Trump is getting an amazing following, because, and what I mean by amazing is, like, it's amazing that people could follow somebody like this, for one thing. And they're a small group, and compared to their numbers, their power is very strong. And I think that the progressive community still kind of sees these Trump supporters as kind of a joke. But one of the main purposes for this video, and I'll probably go over this a couple times, is what's going to happen after Trump is president. And he could be impeached in the next year. That's a very big possibility, because they have enough dirt on that guy to throw him in jail and throw away the key. That probably won't happen. They'll probably give him a slap on the wrist, and they'll give him a big severance package or whatever, and they'll just let him go off and do his business. I mean, he might even have to leave the country, but I doubt it. Because he has numbers. He has celebrity status. And that's something that allows people to have more power than I think people realize. So having political, corporate, and celebrity status at the same time, that is a clusterfuck of power that people need to not underestimate the power of the dark side. And so, what I'm trying to say here is that if he gets assassinated, or if he gets impeached, or something like that, to where he is out of the White House, out of the Capitol, even out of politics entirely, he's got enough power that he could actually accomplish more as a non-president as he could as the current president. And what I mean by that, he's got enough support that if he gets impeached, then that would make his support really fucking intense. So just imagine what it would be like to be like, I'm the impeached president, and there'll be people holding signs instead of saying, the liberals saying, not my president. There could actually be a guy who's not in the White House that people will be holding signs saying, he's still my fucking president and I still support him. Because, and wow, that's going to be interesting. And what happens if he's killed? And he could, I don't think he's going to send somebody to assassinate him, because he is obsessed with staying alive as long as he can. He wants to preserve his life, and a lot of these people are like that. But he's also invested in his sons, and there's a legacy involved. So it's not just Donald J. Trump. It's Trump, the family, the legacy. And there's a massive amount of energy in this Trump thing that I'm calling it. Because I believe it's more than just a person. I believe it's more than just a family. I believe that they are tapping into some power that they don't realize, or that maybe they do realize. And I don't know if it's an actual, ghost or something like that, because I don't like to get really spooky spiritual, though. But if you think about how an ideology works, and it creates neural pathways in the brain, and if these people are brainwashed and they believe that this is going to happen, and they get around each other and they say, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, it's going to be the end of the world, we need to do this and this, or they're saying that the liberals are going to take over and they're going to take our guns, so we need to do this and this and this and this. And when you focus a lot of energy into those kinds of fears and into those kinds of ideas, it does become a monster. And so it's not necessarily what President Trump is doing. It's that there is this unseen thing behind him, and it could have a scientific explanation psychologically, or it could have some metaphysical explanation, which is kind of more where I believe in, and it is controlling him. And I think that if he dies or if he's impeached, I think that power will become even greater. Now, one of the reasons why I think he was so set on going into the White House wasn't necessarily because he wanted the job. There is something about having that job as running the most powerful nation in the world. And I don't believe this stuff in those. I can't remember the name of these films, but there's these Nicolas Cage movies that are so campy, that are kind of like the Indiana Jones of the politics of the United States. And they have all this mystical stuff like, well, these are things reserved for the president. We only tell the president this, and the president gets these privileges to go into these tunnels and have these magical things or whatever. And there could be something to that principle, that there are some things that are reserved for the president of the United States that nobody else in the world would have access to. And I don't know what those things are, but there could very well be something like the button, for instance, which I really don't think we have to worry about him pushing the button as much as people are saying. I think that's one of his tactics that he's using to scare liberals. And if he gets us scared, then we start running in circles, and then we start freaking out, and we start losing our minds like I've been lately, and a lot of the other people have been. And that's one of his goals. And I think he's accomplished a lot of goals relating to, for instance, all this anti-Hillary stuff that a lot of liberals had bought were fabricated by Trump's world. And so, yes, he has accomplished controlling conservatives in a lot of ways, and he's accomplished controlling liberals in a lot of ways as well. And that's something that I don't hear people acknowledge, and I would like somebody to step up and say, I'm a granola crunching liberal, and I believed all this rhetoric that came from the Trump world, and I'm sorry. Well, let's do something about it. One of the things I'd like to see is a new version of the Occupy movement. And I think the Occupy movement could, in fact, turn into not just going after corporate greed, but specifically big healthcare. And that's a big issue now, because apparently some people don't like sick people. And it's a waste of money, and it's a nuisance when people suffer around us, and they ask for money, and they ask for this. So let's just cut funding and see what happens. Now, this could also be another thing that he's working on, if there's hidden agendas that haven't been revealed yet. If you want the rich and privileged to take over the country and to be in power, then one way is to scare and to freak out all the people that are underprivileged, and people like me that are disabled, and we rely on other people, and we rely on systems of healthcare and government and things like that. And if they take that power away, we're going to get really angry, and we're going to get tired of suffering, and we're going to start fighting back. And guess what? we're not very strong. I know there's a lot of disabled people that have firearms, but most disabled people I know, especially on the left, aren't the kind of people that could win in a civil war. And I said civil war before, and I don't like to use that in context of this, because if we do end up having something that gets bad enough to call it a civil war, I don't think it's going to be fought with two parties that have firearms or weapons and going bang, bang, bang. I don't think it's going to look like that. I think it's going to take a lot of different forms, and I think some of the forms that a civil war could take in 2017 are already happening. Crucifixion by media is something that happens a lot, and it's cruel, and it's effective, and people do it all the time when they want to destroy somebody, and it is a form of torture. And I think that's happening a lot, and social media is a fascinating weapon. And I think that it is fueling a civil war. And liberals are responding with their own rhetoric. And they've got these flags that are giving all of this wonderful progressive lefty speech. We tolerate and we honor diversity, and oh, aren't we lovely, and stuff like that. And they're waving American flags with their stuff on it. And I see those and I think, well, those are my views. But at the same time, I look at them and I think, well, it's a response to a civil war that we didn't start. And it's also showing everybody in our country that I'm a liberal and I'm a conservative. And I'm a liberal because I have this American flag on my place of business or worship or where I live that says, in our America, we honor people with disabilities and we love all these people of different religions and blah, 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 and all that stuff. Well, I look at those and I think, well, those are just maybe one way that if there is some kind of civil war going on, that it's marking us red or blue. And I don't like being marked. And I wonder why people are marking themselves. And they also claim to be safe places with those signs. And I know from my experience that most of those places aren't very safe for most people, especially if you're a born-again Christian. So posting a sign that says, we honor all religions, you're safe here, that is not a sign that means everybody is safe in that location. That only means that certain people are safe. And if you are a conservative Republican or whatever it is, then those signs will scare you away. If there is some kind of civil war going on, it's with different agencies and different institutions, so to speak. And what I mean by that is that, let's say, if our government is going way, way, way conservative, then we can mark them on that side. And healthcare is typically, from my experience, because of a lot of the principles that they have, and the fact that you go to a hospital and you say, I'm gay, then they're not going to try to talk you out of it like they would 50 years ago. So I would say that most of healthcare, especially mental health care, would be more on the left. Education, definitely more on the left, because as lefties, we worship education and knowledge. That's like our God. That's our big thing. And it's cool because it's good to know stuff. And the military and law enforcement, that would be more conservative heavy. And churches is really interesting because every other church you go to is either going to be on the right or the left side of politics. There's very few churches that I have ever been into, and I've been in a lot of different kinds of churches. I was raised Unitarian, and then I became a born-again Christian for 12 years, and I was in a lot of these Bible-based churches. And then I went back because I came out of the closet as gay, so I went back to the liberal-type churches. And their theology was different. The politics, everything was different, but they used the same symbols and a lot of the same music and a lot of the same traditions and things like that. So I don't like it when people talk about, oh, just Christians. It's like, no, there are just really two very, very different types of Christians. And I could put those in the category of the progressive Christianity is very much towards Eastern thought. It's their theology and practices a lot of times resembles Buddhism more than Christianity, but they just can't let go of their Christian symbolism and tradition, which is okay. I mean, cool. Mix them together. It's your religion. It's your life. That's great. And then the Christians that are what people would call fundamentalists, where they want to find out, well, what did the Bible experience with these people in the Bible days? Let's try to do that, and let's try to imitate that. And unfortunately, when you try to imitate the Bible, you imitate a lot of the harm that history has told us in the Bible that just doesn't work. And also, it doesn't, very, very little of those traditions can work literally in this day and age. So I wonder what a war would look like between the institution of education in general, kids and adults, colleges, middle schools, everything. And you would have on the other side some kind of legal battle or whatever it is with law enforcement. And what would that look like? And also, these groups that are popping up. In fact, there has been a lot of pro-Trump rallies starting in about March. And some of them were violent. And unfortunately, a lot of the violence comes from the anti-Trump people, folks on the left. And I'm not surprised. Just because anybody you put in government is going to attract anarchists that hate them, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. So a lot of these people aren't necessarily anti-Trump, they're just anti-government. One of the weird things about having this corporate deity in the White House is something that I was talking about in another video, and it's this word right here, and I want you to listen because I'm nearly not good at pronouncing it.
Corporatocracy.
What was that?
Corporatocracy.
Ah, corporatocracy. It's a recent term used to refer an economic and political system controlled by corporations or corporate interests. And so that could be the form of government that we are heading into. And people are worried about, is Trump a fascist? And some are saying, well, he's not organized enough to be a fascist. And yet there are groups organizing in his name. And they could have an agenda that could be different than Trump. It's funny that the born-again Christians were using President Trump for their views, and Trump was using them to get their vote. So we do have this weird symbiotic relationship with these supporters and with the president. And this particular week, he took his first world tour. And it's really weird watching him shaking hands with Islamic leaders, Catholic leaders, and it's like, that's really interesting And it's probably getting a lot of people to think too, because he talks to one group of people and he's anti-Islamic. He talks to another group of people and he loves them. And so, yeah, I mean, it's obvious, what he's all about. You know, being a people pleaser and all that kind of stuff, and then I'd like to get into some sensational ideas. And when I was a born again Christian, we talked a lot about the threat of a one world government, and I think it would be really ironic if born again Christians vote and support a man who ends up accomplishing some type of centralized global power. Now, we already have that in a corporate sense because we have corporations that can have an incredible amount of control on a government because they have control over the people. And if corporations get big enough, then they can have an amazing impact on the economy and the culture of a certain country. And corporations based in the States are doing that already and have for years. Monsanto is one of the best examples, Coca-Cola and McDonald's. And then media companies as well. And they have a form of, it's not really a military though, but like Monsanto has these bullies that they send out that are incredibly aggressive. So in a way, they kind of have a military, whether they're armed or not. And what is it going to look like if we end up with some kind of centralized power that not necessarily is a government type power? If it is a power that is based more in money instead of legislative power, saying like, I'm coming into your country because I'm taking it over. I am doing some kind of hostile takeover or some kind of coup d'etat, and I'm in power now. Now, what happens if somebody says that I am not taking over your government, I'm buying your country, or I am buying the land, or whatever it is? There are ways to demonstrate a lot of power that has nothing to do with weapons and government. Money is fascinating how it works because it is energy like power is, and it is a tangible form of energy that people can use and channel, and they can take streams of all these different sources of income and take a penny from billions and billions of people, and they channel that over here, and then they get power, and then they get privilege, and they are able to accomplish things here and there and there. And we've never seen this much money go to so very few people in the history of this earth. And when people are reaching into the multi-billions, it's going to be interesting what they want to do when they want to cash in. I kind of wonder what could happen if China decides to say, okay, you guys owe us this many $1 trillion. Why don't you we're going to start with you giving us all your national parks, and then we're going to rent those out, and we're going to charge $1 million every time somebody wants to go see Yosemite. I say that to piss people off. Yosemite National Park. Now, this whole thing with Russia could just be a red herring, whatever that means. It could just be a distraction. It could all be made up. Although I don't think it is. I think that there are some ties with Russia because when somebody's that desperate to get in power and they really don't care how they do it, just as long as they get away with it. Yeah, it's just like what happens in movies when you have a supervillain and they cheat and they get away with it. And we might have had presidents do that in the past, but here's a president that I believe cheated and he got away with it. And that is leading to, okay, maybe this whole fiasco could be an opportunity for them to get the American people to hyper focus on one issue. Russia, oh my God, we're we're in cahoots with the Russians now, and people are freaking out. A lot of times they don't understand what kind of people Russians are. I've lived in Russia, and I am not afraid of them. They're wonderful people. They're great, and I'm not even really afraid of their government either. And I don't think that that could be a huge issue. There could be something else in the work, like Iran or China or some other nation, or maybe something that is going to take us completely by surprise. Um, an example would, I think it was Iowa. It was one of the first U.S. states to get same-sex marriage. It was Massachusetts, and then suddenly, boom, Iowa. And then 3 or 4 years ago, suddenly the whole nation accepts gay marriage. Well, not accepts it, but I mean it's legal now in every state. Last time I checked, it seems to change every couple of minutes, though. But yeah, I'm saying that things sneak up on people. And when Trump got elected, that was definitely a surprise to liberal America. And it wasn't a surprise to me because I had already believed that he was going to win. I could say that I had the same grieving process as a lot of people did, but I experienced it at a different time. And something's going to sneak up on people, and they're going to be like, oh, I can't believe Trump did this and this and this and this, and they're freaking out. And then there could be something bigger that would be like, oh, fuck. That's what was really going to happen? Oh my God. And I think that could very well happen, and it could very well happen very soon. And I don't think there's going to be a Trump version of ISIS. I don't think there's going to be violent terrorist acts, although if things do get that bad, and if there's a big possibility because we have some very angry and very powerful and very armed people that are supporting Trump's world. And it's also revealing a lot of like white supremacists and people that felt like they didn't have a voice before are now feeling a little more safe and affirmed, as a good liberal would say, to preach their bigotry. And so, very interesting. So, anyways, one of the things that people like President Trump do, that I've dealt with narcissist type people before, is they're really good, and I hate to use this term, game playing, but yeah, it is. If I'm going to have a meeting with a narcissist and we're going to accomplish trying to resolve some kind of issue, and I've learned this the hard way many times, is it's like playing a game of chess, and I sit down, and for some reason, he's going to win the game no matter what, because he's planned something ahead of time. And I typically don't see, it's kind of like when I was a school bus driver. I'm trying to keep my eyes on the road. I'm trying to make sure all these kids get home and they don't hurt themselves or each other. Now, what the kids are trying to do, they're trying to think about how they can outsmart the bus driver and break the rules. And these were middle schoolers mostly, and they're doing this every day. And I simply could not catch up with how smart these kids were, because here they've been on Earth for over 10 years. They've gotten all this knowledge, and they get really smart, and suddenly their hormones kick in, and all that smart kind of gets turned inward for a lot of kids, and then they just want to serve themselves, and they want to rebel, and they want to use their knowledge and their experience on Earth as doing that. So anyways, that's how middle schoolers do it. How does the president do it? Well, here's the thing, is that if he remains president, especially if he gets elected again, which I don't think is going to happen, then yeah, he's won. I mean, you can't become more of a hotshot than that, but there really could be more to being the president of the most powerful country and the most powerful military in the whole world. And so I believe that if he loses, he's still going to win. I really believe that. I really believe that if he loses his career as the president, that it is going to enable him to be able to do more or about the same power and influence that he has now as president. And I've experienced this because I don't know if I want to go into specifics, but I just don't know what it's like to get in the head of somebody who can have human compassion and guilt, and then whenever they want to, just turn it off. And it takes a certain kind of brain to do that. And that's what I think is scaring people the most, is the fact that he's demonstrated a lot of those characteristics that a serial abuser would do. And his attitude towards those that are powerless, underprivileged, suffering, and minorities, and all those kinds of folks, and how he talks about people like us. And I think what happens too in a society, and I've said this before, is that President Trump is a big symptom of a system that needs to change. And so it's not just him that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a very large group of people that have been disappointed by our country. And they've been disappointed by our last administration. And our last administration favored a lot of causes and a lot of views that made life more difficult for a lot of Americans. And one of those is, I think it was coal. I think coal miners. Oh yeah, he even coined a phrase about coal miners too, which was so funny. And here he's taking a a population of people who were very hurt and giving them kind of back their lives, giving them their jobs back, sort of, or promising them that. And that's empowering these kinds of people. And so, yeah, he's being very good to his own kind, or not his own kind. He's using these people. He sees people as objects, because I know what it's like to be objectified by a sociopathic type person who sees people as just a means to accomplish their agendas. Not as somebody who's, oh, this person is hurting, they need my help, they need some support, da da da. So, wow. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you for putting up with this very, very long, ranting talk here. But as part of my project called Fake Zappa, I love exposing things that are fake. And I love being a fake too, because I have learned to pretend to be other people. And I was so fake when I was a preacher, and I was fake growing up because I felt like I had to be somebody that I wasn't in order to be accepted. And a lot of people go through that. So pretending to imitate a career of one of my favorite artists, Frank Zappa, and also we've got a fake president. He's just somebody who I don't consider, although literally he is, he's a fake. He's got the position of the presidency. It's kind of like fake healthcare. I go to the doctor and I get nothing. I get sent home, and it's like, I'm paying for this. That's fake. It's an empty envelope. And I think there's going to be a generation of people that are going to be tired of empty envelopes. And just as we're seeing these teenagers that are starting these organizations supporting our president, it's like, wow, I mean, I understand an 80-year-old guy who's got a rifle collection would want to support this president. But, 18, 19-year-old kids that are going into college, it's staggering. But yeah, I understand why, because he represents the future of their world. And they do. They live in a different world. Their brains are wired differently. They have a whole different set of priorities. And I've been there. I know what that's like. And I also see young people on the left, and a lot of young people that are growing up in Republican households are going to see the Republican Party as being Trump's world because Trump ran as the Republican. So they're going to associate that with, and then they're going to leave the Republican Party. There's also going to be a lot of reform in the Republican Party, too. We're already starting to see that. A lot of anti-Trump Republicans, a lot of them. In fact, a lot of them are even in Congress and even in the White House. A lot of these, I mean, not the White House, the Capitol. There's probably, I can imagine he's got family members that are anti-Donald too, even in his own house. It'd be really interesting to see what would happen if there was some irreconcilable family conflict with either his son or his wife or both, and that there would be some kind of separation or some kind of lawsuits against him because of the way he treats his family. And that would be really, that would be a new thing to see in the White House. That would. And young people are going to really start acting and speaking more than I've seen. I mean, I was an anti-war protester when I was growing up, and it felt good. It really did. And I think a lot of people are going to really feel this solidarity and feeling like they have a common, quote, enemy, and that something else I'm thinking about too, and this could be another good reason why we have Donald Trump as our president, is that, yeah, he's tearing down our system. He's just tearing apart so many things that worked, and he's tearing apart a lot of things that didn't work. And one of those things was the Affordable Health Care Act. And I have some information that I've collected about that process and about how ridiculous it was to try to do socialized medicine when we allow corporations to have way too much control. So what's the point of having socialized medicine when the corporations have the power to fight it? And so it was destined to fail, in my opinion. And what they call Obamacare was something a lot of people are sad that is being destroyed. But I honestly think that we can't have socialized medicine when we deregulate corporations. And something I'm thinking about, and this might not be the right term to use, but I don't hear this term being used very much. I'm calling it corporate anarchy. And it's just a system where, and it's funny because I run a small business and it's pretty limited what I can do though, but the more power I have, the more I can bend the rules, and the more the rules don't apply. And it's like the more money somebody makes, the less taxes they have to pay. And it's amazing how it's going and going higher and higher, where these people are getting more and more powerful. And there's going to be a time when all these sick and suffering people are going to revolt. And unfortunately, we're not strong. And I don't know if I want to be around if that ever happens. Because most of us who are suffering we have numbers, that's it. But sometimes numbers, and we've seen this with the Soviet Union and other countries and things in the history of the earth, is that sometimes numbers of people don't matter in the millions, the tens, maybe hundreds of millions. And that's where I start to get sad thinking about that. And in some ways, I really don't have a lot of hope, and in some ways I do. And so I'm just going to finish this video because it's time for the Colbert Report in 2 minutes. So I'm going to log out and I'm going to hear some Colbert Trump jokes. So thank you for watching.
Everybody back there now! Get back there now! Go! Move to the monument! Hey, come on, get your hat. Guys, let's go! Back! Come on! Let's go! Punch that one in the back of the head. Go back. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Right back. Come on, you guys. Back it up.
Thank you for watching, and hopefully I won't do any more of these videos because they're way too long.
My dear Michael Cohen, I am here with a group of people that are praying for and encouraging Mr. Donald Trump. Yes. These are the tribe. Would you all encourage him? Yes. Because God has given this man an anointing for the mantle of government in the United States, and he will prosper.